welcome to the Self-Storage Made Simple podcast. Really blessed today to be joined by somebody who I've been lucky to get to know over the course of 2024. Hosts maybe the initial mastermind within self-storage and an unbelievable group of people that he's brought together in the Self-Storage Mastermind. Host of an amazing podcast, the Self-Storage Investor Show. Maybe more importantly, the founder, operator of Kingdom Storage Partners, actually does what it is he tells other people and teaches and brings other people together to do. Incredibly successful operation, owning hundreds of thousands of square feet, maybe into the millions now, right? Scott Meyers, Thank you so much for joining us and appreciate you taking some time to come on the podcast.
It's my pleasure, Thaddeus, and good to be back in your presence again, even if we're not in the same room, but glad to be here.
So lucky. And I want to start, I always start the podcast with the same question because self-storage is such a niche industry and such a special industry, which you get to see firsthand every time you host a live event for your mastermind quarterly around the country. And just the individuals that are in this industry are so special. I always like to know, how did people find their way into this industry? So how did Scott Meyers get into self-storage?
Yeah, I think self-storage found me. This is an industry where, it's a simple, predictable business model. It doesn't mean it's an easy business, but it's something that you can replicate over and over again once you get it down pat and nail it down. And that's perfect for me because although I like to think that I'm creative and I'm one of the smarter people in the room, at the end of the day, I'm not. And so this is a good business class for knuckleheads like me to be able to make a whole lot of money and make a huge impact and create a business and a lifestyle that has afforded my family and I, the ability to travel around the world, both on the mission field and otherwise, and to just create an incredible life for ourselves. And so my career started in self-storage, if you will. It started in real estate like so many other folks, and that is with single family houses. And bought my first property after watching a Carlton Sheets infomercial back in the day for, the gray hairs out there will remember that name. And we bought a single family house, 3-bedroom, 1-bath, bread and butter ranch in a working class neighborhood with no money down, using an assumable VA loan, those are no longer around. Those have been cycled through, and then a private equity line on my own home. And that was the first. And then we rehabbed it, refinanced it, rented it out. So the Burr method, before it was called the Burr method. And then we bought 2 more, and then we bought 5 more, and we got up to 75 houses. And we didn't have the time that my wife and I that we thought that we would have once we got into this. That Carlton Sheets, the guru told us that we would have, and all the trappings of it. All we had was we had a lot of tenants, and we had a lot of toilets and trash, and a big portfolio to manage. So I thought, well, economies of scale would fix this, and so we started buying apartments and got up to about 425 apartments, and all that did was really compound the problems. And so I didn't, what I found, Thaddeus, and I think you may have heard me say this before, is that I was becoming less loving of my fellow man after being a landlord. And so I thought, that and the fact that we didn't really have the cash flow that we had anticipated by this stage, and the time that it just took to be able to manage that, I thought there had to be a better way. And so, long story short, we began to look at the other asset classes out there and what could eliminate tenants and toilets and trash, and it's parking lots and storage. And you can't build a lot of value in parking lots, but you can in storage. So once I dug in and looked at the business model, and I liked what I saw, we bought our first facility and saw the light, and the rest is history. We sold off everything else. And then since 2005, that's all we've done. Just, 100% full bore in self-storage, investing all over the country, buying, developing, converting buildings into self-storage, and then creating the education company to go alongside of it. And that's what we've been doing for the past 20 plus years now.
How many square feet are you operating currently?
Yeah, so we're operating. We've bought, developed, sold, converted, over 5 million, and I think we've currently have it just over or just shy of 3 million right now. And so we're always, as we grow, we syndicate, as a number of our projects, and so they have a 3 or a 5 year hold or somewhere in between there, and so we're rolling our money through and our investors as well. And so at any given time, we're probably right around that 3 million square foot mark.
Love that. And listen, there's so many roads I want to go down. You brought up mission work, you brought up travel, you brought up time with your wife and family, which are all things I'm going to try and dig into this 30-minute window that we have. But before I go there, you said
Mm-hmm.
something that I thought was really interesting, which was about accumulating doors in single family residential and then
Mm-hmm.
transitioning into multifamily,
Mm-hmm.
which tends to be the trajectory that people go
Yeah.
on. You're not the only
Mm-hmm.
person. Carlton Sheets was famous back in the day. I
Mm-hmm.
got into single family residential from Cole Hatter, who's another education guy
Mm-hmm.
now. That's a
Yep.
pretty normal trajectory, but you weren't
Mm-hmm.
willing to settle. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
interested to know what it was that, like, when you had 400 doors,
Mm-hmm.
how do you make that decision to go spend even more time going and examining and looking at other asset classes? What flipped that switch for you?
Yeah, I think part of it was the ebb and flow of the time as well as the income. Very cyclical. Multifamily is very cyclical, and not only are we beholden to interest rates and at the time in which we're either refinancing or exiting or buying, but also in terms of occupancy. And there's lots of factors that affect occupancy, and when people are moving in and moving out, and people get behind in their bills after Christmas, and so we have a drop in income, and we have an increase in evictions, and so there was always just this wild swing up and down with the markets, and at the site level, at the apartment complex level, and when I looked at storage and now experiencing this, when things are good in our economy, people buy more stuff and they store more stuff, and occupancy increases. When we have a pullback or a recession in our economy, well, businesses downsize, individuals downsize, and they either, individuals move back in with their friends, their family, or back home with their parents. Businesses downsize, and they may give up a lease for a smaller one or sublease, and they put their equipment or materials into self-storage, and we get the hockey stick effect during a recession. It actually, I would never say that self-storage is recession proof, but it's extremely recession resistant, and it actually operates better during a recession than it does in good times, because that's when people are rushing to self-storage, because we're in the trauma and transition business. And so to see that that steady level, when I begin to peel back the onion and look at the stats on the industry, I thought, yeah, I kind of like something that's a little more predictable and that does better during a recession versus what we were facing. I mean, you've seen the numbers out there right now. I think like $493 billion of multifamily debt that is
Yeah.
in trouble, that is redline, that is coming out. And we're going to see once again another tumultuous time, and a slew of foreclosures, and a whole lot of operators, even good operators, that are going to go down just because of the swing in interest rates and the rising operating costs, where self-storage clicks in the opposite direction, just continues to go strong like gangbusters. So once again, it doesn't have to be a sexy asset class. It's just got to be solid, and I'll perfect the model, and I'll get my time and my freedom back.
I can remember one of the very first developers I ever met when I got into this in 2021 was Bill Leitner out of Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And his
Mm-hmm.
daughter was going to Princeton at the time studying economics. And he's like, she always busts my chops because it's self-storage and it's so unsexy. And
Mm-hmm.
he said, all I ever say to her is look at the bottom line at the end of the year, right? Like it doesn't have to look sexy
It
from the
doesn't.
outside. Look at the
No,
profit and loss statement, right?
I don't care. It doesn't matter what I do. It's the end goal. You know what? It may not be sexy, but you know what's sexy? Free time and cash flow. I mean, that's what's sexy. So it doesn't matter what the vehicle is, as long as it's
So
above the law.
I love that you said that because it's where I want to transition next. And we could
Mm-hmm.
literally spend hours and hours talking about this. But one of the things I am immediately most impressed about with you is the way you operate around other people and who you've managed to bring into your circle. So I want to kind of go down the
Mm-hmm.
road of the self-storage mastermind and what made you
Mm-hmm.
start that, and dig a little bit into the rabbit hole of who the people are in that room, because it's a truly
Mm-hmm.
special place.
Yeah, I think like many entrepreneurs, at least the good ones out there, you see an opportunity in the marketplace for something, and if nobody's already providing it, well, then it's up to you to start it. And there wasn't a self storage mastermind out there. There wasn't an education company until we came along, and so as for twofold, as our students became successful in getting into one facility after the next and the next, it takes a different skill set to go from buying your first facility to then growing and scaling a business. And so that is something that we didn't offer at the time, but also, we recognize we're teaching all these folks. And even though I get a chance, once or twice a year to go to the industry shows and, bat back and forth different ideas and business practices with the other folks in the industry on a regular basis, I want to be able to do that, and also do it with my own tribe that I could go through business life with, that knows me and I know them and their business, so that we can share information and begin to grow and scale something together. And so yeah, it was just born out of, the next step. There wasn't a mastermind out there. And then selfishly, I wanted to be in a room with a whole bunch of self-storage rock stars that are growing and scaling, that we can gather data and practices from market data to different parts of the country where everybody's operating from, to who's doing what, being able to have ears to the ground all over the country. Even though my organization wasn't that big, all of us could, lean on each other to grab market data and information from the brokers to sellers to just what we're seeing overall operationally. And then, yeah, to share deals back and forth. We have, as you know, Thaddeus, this is, we've built the biggest underground community of self-storage investors that are trading deals back and forth that nobody will ever see out there listed in the magazines or on any stats at the end of the year from the brokers that are all bragging about where they're at. And we kind of quietly chuckle when we look at the stats at our mastermind. It's just like, well, we're doing more than the top guys out there, but it's just nobody knows about us. So that's why we created it. And it's just been kind of cool to see how it's gone from there. And you're right, just the people in the room have just been incredible. And, I'm thankful for the people that God bless us with in that group, because it has just made a huge difference in our business and the industry.
So I first went and I joined Safe Storage USA, Russell and David, and you have pretty strict criteria for membership in the mastermind. You have to own self-storage. You don't just get to come in and
Right.
learn without an entry fee. And that's a pretty steep entry fee, especially these days, with what self-storage facilities are trading for. But I was there in Sarasota in February, and James Reed, who now has become a really dear friend of mine, was giving a speech. And I was blown away because he was so confidently and comfortably up in front of this room of, there must have been 50, 60 people in the room, talking about his relationship with Jesus and God and how important that was in guiding everything he does in his business. And I'm interested because that type of thing always comes from the top, right? You don't see somebody at a mastermind like that feeling that comfortable and that confident in that environment. That's something that you've really cultivated in your mastermind, I would say.
I think if you look at any group that has a following, any influencer or mastermind, I think most of the folks they attract are people that are attracted to that individual or the group that is leading that, just because they're like-minded. And so, no, we don't hide our faith. We wear it on our sleeve, and I am fully aware of the blessings that I have, and the success is not me alone by any stretch. And so, to be able to once again be able to build the kingdom through my business, and to do that with other like-minded individuals, whether it's in our mastermind or just in day-to-day business, well, it just makes life much easier. There's less friction, and it's simpler to do, and it's just great when, as the old adage, the fire burns hotter when the coals are closer together. And when you got a whole bunch of believers in a room that are doing business and building great families and lives for themselves and building the kingdom, I couldn't ask for anything more.
I thought that was so powerful. And of course, you don't just talk it. You have a mission trip coming up in November, and you do this every year, going down to Mexico. Tell me a little bit about that, and how it came about, and how important it is to you and the people that you are surrounding yourself with.
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, Thaddeus, that points back to the reasons why we got into self-storage, is because when my wife and I got married, we had a couple of goals. And one of them was that we were going to raise our kids, and we wanted to have time to be able to do that. And we didn't have that time when we were in the tenant and toilet business. And so as we pivoted into, self-storage, it wasn't until that point that we got our time back, and we had the resources to be able to give back. And so, yeah, we made a commitment many years ago to tithe 10% on our corporate profits and put money aside to go on these mission trips. And they're short-term, family-friendly mission trips where we build a house in 2 days. It's a 4-day trip, a day of travel on the front and the back end. And in less than 2 days, we're able to build a 16 by 20 house, starting with a concrete slab and a pile of wood and a bunch of tools, and a whole bunch of folks with big hearts that want to give back. And we build a house, and at the end of that time, we hand the keys over to the individuals who are going to live in it. And this is the first time these individuals have ever had a key to a front door and not living on dirt, but living on a concrete slab, and where their health improves, their future improves, and we're ending generational poverty one family and one house at a time. And we've blessed enough to be able to do 40 plus houses now. I think we're at 41. And so we're going to build another 3, maybe 4 more coming up in December. We've got some additional funding that has come in from some outside sources. And yeah, it's, that alone has been incredible. But what we never saw coming, Thaddeus, was the ripple effect that the folks that we've taken on these trips, and we do it for a reason. We pay for it for a reason. People want to come on these trips. We pay for your entire trip. You just got to get to San Diego, and we take care of the rest. Is to expose them to what this would be like. Our friends, family, coworkers, vendors, partners. See what it's like to be able to give back and to have an open hand. And many of them have been touched, and they felt a call to do likewise. And now they're building houses alongside of us, or they're doing other, great, big mission work. They've just, they got the bug, or they were touched, or somebody tapped them on the shoulder and said, hey, this is your life's calling, and this is what you're supposed to do with your abundance. And the ripple effect has just been far beyond what I ever would have anticipated. So yeah, we'll continue to go on these trips as long as I have the energy and air in our lungs and the ability to, for our companies to throw off cash to be able to make it happen.
It makes me feel so special to hear that story and to be a part of your mastermind, and just think, because that's kind of what we aspire to, right? Nobody gets into business with this idea of, hey, I'm just going to become rich for myself. Maybe there's some people out there like that, but from the people I've ever dealt with that are entrepreneurs, by and large, they have a mission beyond just the business they're starting. Yeah. So when you hear that, and you said something, ripple effect, that was so awesome. When you start that trend and you start to see it multiply and become exponential, what an amazing gift.
Yeah, it really has been, and I like to think that even if people do start out and they just want the money and maybe the freedom as well, that I think somewhere along the lines, they recognize that maybe all of this wasn't just me. I didn't get all this just because of me and my efforts and how great I am, but perhaps this was a gift to me, because I am supposed to go out and create an impact and significance and legacy with what I've been blessed with. And, I would hope that people get to that place. But it is, I don't think anybody, even before long, they recognize that, hey, there's a little bit more to this, because it ebbs and flows, it comes, it goes. And money does not, as they say, buy you happiness. It would make you happy for a minute, but true joy comes from within, and doing something else that is making a greater impact in other people's lives, or for the planet, or whatever that is that you decide to get behind.
Love that, and so appreciate you sharing all about that. I'm going to take advantage of the Scott Meyers that is as knowledgeable or more knowledgeable than almost anybody in this industry now, because we're at a really interesting time in self-storage, as we're kind of maybe hitting that mature asset class mark now. Like we've kind of gone beyond the baby steps 10, 15 years ago to kind of maturing for the last decade or so. And then, of course, we saw COVID, which was maybe the most crazy time any asset class has ever gone. Like, what happened in self-storage during COVID? And we'll talk about that a little bit. But I'm going to ask you right now, especially we're filming this 2 days after Jerome Powell announced a 50-point drop in the Fed rate, announced possibly up to 6 more drops he's planning over the next 15 months. What is the outlook for getting into self-storage right now and digging a little deeper? You've said it, right? You've bought existing assets, value adds, done ground up development. Where's the potential right now, and where do you think is going to be the route that people go if they're getting into storage?
Yeah, there's a lot in that, isn't there? So first of all,
question easy.
I'd say, Thaddeus, that I don't even know that we're a mature industry yet. I'd say we're in our adolescent phase right now, and only because I'm looking at that from a lens of comparison to the other commercial asset classes, in which 80%, 85%, 90% of the industries are dominated by and owned by the REITs and the national players. And so I'm talking about multifamily and assisted living and hotels, certainly, and retail, for the most part, those properties, there's some that still trades hands from individual owners on the smaller end, but that's really only about 15%, whereas self-storage is just the opposite of that. I mean, when I got involved in 2005, it was 90-10. 90% was still mom and pop, is very fragmented, and 10% were the REITs, and now we're sitting at about 80-20. But within that 80%, there are also a number of national players that are getting larger, and so the great roll up, the goal, at least for us, not everybody, is let's get a gaggle of properties, let's get a handful of properties, or 20 properties, develop them, make sure that either we are building, or that we're acquiring, or that we are converting buildings that are REIT ready. So REITs are interested in buying them, and then we're going to pool them together and roll them up and then sell them off, because we get that, anywhere from 50 basis points or higher, bump in or drop in a cap rate and bump in a value. And, that seems to be the game is, the race is to scale up and then to be able to sell. Because there's more money to be made there. So, I would say we're kind of in our adolescent stage there. But in terms to specific market time where we're at right now, this is the benefit of being through, having the gray hair and loss of hair over the years, is that we've been at this for a while. This ain't our first rodeo. 30 years in real estate, we've been through a couple of recessions now and call it essentially a third if you include the pandemic. And so we saw this coming. The goal was, after the last one, is to strengthen those relationships with our lenders, create the largest group of private equity partners and funds that want to come alongside of us, and then buy up everything we can, so that when we can take advantage of this cycle. So when the pendulum swings again, and now the interest rates are coming down, and therefore cap rates are coming down, then we're selling at the highest valuation. And so, we've been quietly or not really quietly, but we've been developing like mad fiends over here, and buying as long as it looks right, and converting. And we're extremely active. This is the most active year that we've had in terms of all acquisitions, development, conversion, because we're going to be ready in a year and a half, 2 years, when the rates are down at the bottom and the activity is a flurry again. We'll be exiting a lot of these properties at the peak. And then we'll decide what to do after that. So I can't say this will be my last go around, but I think things in the next maybe 2 to 3 years, life for Scott and wife and family is going to look a little bit different once we exit all these projects that we've been amassing over the years.
Love that. So I'm interested to know, like today, we're taping this September 20th, 2024. Where do you see, you say you're doing a little bit of everything. So is what you're saying, like it's not one path necessarily that looks more beneficial to you right now. It's one deal versus another deal.
Yeah, I think that also ebbs and flows. It depends on the economy and what's going on. At the time where we are right now, September 20th of 24. We're heading into an election season again, and let's not talk about that, but let's only talk in terms of what we know happens, and what we're experiencing is that many lenders, many banks have pencils down, or they're looking at deals very conservatively if they are gonna lend on them. So we're tapping into the pension funds, insurance companies, and other means and resources for our development projects, because that is more speculative, and the banks are kind of sitting back waiting on that. Acquisitions, we have the benefit of being at this business for a while is that we've done extremely well by all our lenders, and so they still lend to us. But I know that some of our students that we're coaching that are getting into their first projects, or they're early on in their career, their lenders are pulling back, and they are just waiting, or the terms are not as attractive as what we would like to see, or they would like to see. And in some cases, some of the lenders are making it so unattractive that the borrower is just saying, potential borrower is just saying no, and that's kind of what the banks are looking for. So I think that's the difficulty that we're that we're facing right now. But no, we've development has been harder for some folks, and even for us, the LTVs have come down a little bit, or loan to cost, if you will. But in terms of our acquisitions and conversions, we still have the funds available. Our lending partners, because of our reputation, our history, are still lending to us, and we're transacting. There are some folks that are being faced. The folks that did treat it like a hobby and didn't get educated in the industry several years ago. They didn't build the value, and now they can't refinance, and they're forced to sell. And so we're seeing those come to market, and we're picking some of those up here and there as well. So that's, I don't know if I answered your question. Yes, we're doing all of the above, but some areas of the industry right now are easier to operate in than others.
So I want to go down this road. You just brought something up, some people that maybe got into this business, 2019, 2020, 2021. You're seeing this COVID boom, and it, human nature is what human nature is. When you look at a bunch of deals, you try and underwrite something to make it work. Sometimes it takes a lot of discipline to not get caught up in that wave. Are we gonna see a big group of deals come on the market that really are distressed? You talked about multifamily earlier, and the hundreds of billions of dollars of bad debt. Because storage has been so successful and the margins have been so good, are we going to see that level of distressed properties hit the market, or have we kind of turned the corner with the rate drop where maybe you're not going to see that kind of, catastrophe come to play out?
Well, that is, you already know the answer to that, and that is, it depends, obviously.
I'd let you answer.
So here's, it what it depends upon is, when they bought in the cycle. And, again, if they were purchasing properties, these investors are getting into deals and they were highly leveraged, 85, 90% LTV at 4%. And now let's just say the refinance market is at 65% and 7.5%. Well, it's a math problem, a math equation, and that'll dictate whether they have to come to the table with dollars to keep their property, or if they have to come with keys and hand it back to the bank. And that's all predicated on the fact that on whether they were able to create enough value. So they got the higher valuation now and still a higher appraisal, even at today's cap rates and interest rate, that it covers the refinance of the underlying debt and the ability to close. So sometimes it's a cycle issue. Maybe they didn't have enough time to build that value. Or sometimes they were just plain lazy and didn't do it, or they didn't have the knowledge, didn't know how, or they thought it was a set it, forget it business, and the market and the industry would just take care of it. Or other times they bought a solid Class A facility or Class B facility that just didn't have a lot of value to be added. When they bought it, it was just a turnkey and rates were at the top of the market. There weren't any really income streams that they could add to it, maybe insurance or something here and there. And they just, they were solid operators and it's a solid property, but they weren't able to create the value. And it's just, where we find ourselves in terms of the market and the interest rates and LTVs that caught them, and now they have to sell it. So there's a lot of variables obviously out there. And so because as you mentioned, because the industry does so well, we won't see as many distressed deals, but sometimes there's distressed borrowers and distressed buyers. And they're the ones that are getting caught in this, even if they are solid individuals with solid credit scores and they were running a solid business. They just didn't have the upside to cover it.
I'm interested to know. First, I want to say two things you said there. One was this idea of gray hair, right? That
Mm-hmm.
there's a certain level of time that you have to put into something to take
Yeah.
advantage of markets like this, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the
Mm-hmm.
other thing you said was relationships. So those
Mm-hmm.
two things together, you can spend a lot of time in an industry, and if you're a jerk and you don't build those positive relationships with the people you do business with, it's not going to position you well for a day like this. But
Right.
when you've spent 15, 20
Mm-hmm.
years in an industry and you've
Yeah.
treated the people you've worked with well, you put yourself in that position to take advantage of a market swing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. You could say that is the keys to the kingdom, Thaddeus. I mean, just running your business solid, treating your staff well, hiring really good people whose values are aligned with yours, and then just operating from a place of integrity, no matter who you come into contact with in business, and never taking advantage of anyone, but just doing the right thing all the time. And then being intentional in your relationships, because those are the people that you want around you when things do get difficult. And if you haven't built those core of folks, and if you haven't created those relationships, I mean, lenders are going to do whatever they want, and they turn nasty, or they turn the nasty people within their organization loose when things get rough, even if your lender is good. But you know what? They're willing to maybe go the extra mile because you've done well. They know that you have that you operate from a different place, and they just kind of look at you and say that something's different about that one. And so we're going to lean over on this individual over here when it comes to what they have to do, or bringing a property back, heaven forbid, or anything else. And I think you'll find that you get a little more preferential treatment, or you just get treated fairly when things go bad, or when you're stretched a little bit in your business. And so yeah, I don't know. It's just we don't know how to operate any differently. But I just see other folks out there that are a little more, well, some that are just flat out nefarious, or folks that just don't treat other people well, and their staff and their partners and their lenders leave them just because they weren't operating from a great place, and they're not going to go to bat for them at that point. So again, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's just kind of what we've
100%.
experienced.
Something I believe so strongly at 50 years old that I wish I'd known at 25 is the value of doing, you talked about it, right? The closer the coals are, the brighter the
Mm-hmm.
fire burns, but
Yeah.
it has to be the right coals, right?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no, being around people with the wrong energy is the quickest way to ruin your business. So
Mm-hmm.
makes perfect sense to me that you've had the success that you do. Those of you watching or listening, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, all the links to Scott's various endeavors are down at the bottom, so you can look at his education company, the mastermind information. His podcast links are down there. Find out how to get in contact with him. Could not more highly suggest the community that he's built. As you can see, just by listening to him for a half an hour, just a good human being. And it's so
Mm.
thankful again. I know how busy your life is. We just talked about that. You've been on the road this year, and we could go another half hour
Yeah.
talking about that, but really appreciate you knocking out a half hour of your life to come and share all the knowledge that you have, not only about storage, which is great, but I think on a higher level about how to live a life the right way. So can't thank you enough.
Thanks again, Thaddeus. So good to be back together again, and looking forward to being in the same room with you as well. So thank you for your time as well, and all your kind words.
Appreciate it. That's it for this week's episode of the Self-Storage, or that's his podcast, the Self-Storage Made Simple podcast. I almost said the Self-Storage Investor Show, which is your podcast, which you should follow as well. Thank you, as always, to PropRise, outpacing the self-storage market for your deal flow. Check out those guys at www.proprise.io. Appreciate their continued support and sponsorship of the podcast. We'll see you guys next week.